right, let's get started. Thank you all for coming. I see some more people are still arriving, so I'll let them in. But in the meantime, this will be an interesting book talk with Jim Jordan, or JP Jordan, who lives in Door County now. And I had the chance of reading some of his book, and it was pretty exciting, thriller. And I hope others of you will have a chance. We have it in our library catalog at infosoup.org if you'd like to try that. Jim, can you tell us something about your background? I understand you were in the insurance business in Illinois, was it? And
Nope.
Wisconsin? Always in Wisconsin?
Always in Wisconsin. I had 37 years in Wisconsin. For the most part, I worked for two major niche insurance, national niche carriers. The one first down in Neenah at a place called Jewelers Mutual. We insured jewelry across the country, the largest insurer of jewelry. And then spent 14 years at Church Mutual insuring religious institutions. And so that was kind of a nice little tie-in to the book here.
Yes, you have a real background that you can write about, a real knowledge of the business. So that makes it really interesting. And can you tell us a little bit about how you got the idea for the book? Have you always wanted to be a writer?
I have. I've wanted to write a book for the longest time. Having the time is the real issue. And if you're going to write a book, I think for me, it took about a year to write the book, and that was putting about 4 hours a day into the process to get the initial draft through. So it's just something between work and family and anything else that you wanted to do, and made it really very difficult to do until I retired and had the time to be able to do it.
And so you retired to Door County from other places in the state, and are you here full time now?
Yeah, we moved here from Wausau about 4 years ago. I think we've owned the home for about 5 years, but the plan had been to move to Door County, and we live. We're the classic Door County resident. We live in Liberty Grove. We can see Ephraim, but our mail comes from Sister Bay.
And you'll have nice long winters to stay at home and write in front of a
well, and that's exactly when I do the writing, is in the wintertime. So
I see. And where did you get the idea for the book? From actual experience or from just a creative, your imagination?
it was, well, I lived working at a church insurer for many years, and I was exposed to some of the claims. I didn't work in claims there, but when you start seeing that kind of thing, boy, your brain kind of goes that way. You see stuff on the internet, and a lot of this stuff is pretty well documented.
Madison, are you super busy right now?
The idea of the Catholic problem, which is not just the Catholic problem, but
Mhm.
all the other stuff that you see with some of the people in the religious business that aren't really the most religious folks, so I kind of took that premise, and they always say, write what you know, and I don't know that it had ever been done in terms of the connection to the insurance part. So it was part of it I knew, and part of it was imagination.
Well, I'll bet you had a lot of stories that you heard, as you said, that you could use in the book. How long did it take you to write the book, and what is your writing style? Can you tell us something about that?
Literally.
You said you write in the winter primarily?
Right in the winter, but the whole first draft probably took a year, again, putting 4 hours a day into it, pretty much afternoon. I'll come in here, lock myself into my office, and my wife doesn't see me until about 5 o'clock. And there's some days where you go, you're writing 1,000 words, which doesn't sound like all that much, but that's a good day. And the first draft, when I got done, I didn't have any clue as to what I was doing. I was kind of learning on the fly because I had done the research, but I didn't know how long books were supposed to be. And when I got done, I was pretty proud. It was about 120,000 words. And then I start finding out from people that are in the know, and you start going to not trade shows, but conventions, and you start talking to the publishers, and they're looking for a mystery thriller to be in the 80 to 90,000 word range.
Wow.
So I spent the next winter recrafting the first deal, the first draft, and had to cut out a murder, and I got it down to 110,000 words or 108,000 words. And then it was kind of strange when the editing process got done, we actually added more to it, which I thought editing would go the opposite direction. I think we finished at around 111,000 words. So the publisher was fine with it, and the story held together, at least as far as I was concerned. So
how did you find your publisher? I've heard different people talking about conferences as being really important. And
yeah, it's a very frustrating process, frankly. I mean, you can go out and find the old-fashioned publisher. You go out and try to contact them by email and or by letter, and you're kind of hoping for any kind of response. It's a strange industry that I'm still trying to figure out. 90% of the time you get no response to any letter at all. Not even a rejection. They just ignore you. And I know that they're bombarded, but nonetheless, it's certainly not what I expected. So anyhow, I started going to conferences. There's one in a very good one down in Oshkosh called the Lake Fly Writers Conference around Mother's Day in May, and pitched my book. I had the book, and then you go in, you sign up, and you sit down with the publishers, and you go in, and basically you've got the elevator speech about why you think the book is good. They spend 10 or 15 minutes with you if they've got questions. If you've had a really good session, they say, send me 5, 10, 50 pages. And I think it was about the second or third go round before I finally connected with Shannon at Orange Hat down in Waukesha and said, send me 50 pages. And she called me back and said, yeah, we'd like to do this.
oh, nice.
But that was another year of trying to find a publisher. I never got into one of those great bidding wars that I always keep reading about, where they're fighting over your book. So that would have been the great problem to have.
Yeah. Have you ever tried self-publishing, or did you go straight to trying to find a publisher?
I really didn't want to, because I think some of the bookstores really not interested in self-published works. And I always figured I had that in the back of my pocket, but then I started looking at I was still going to have to do stuff that I really didn't know. I mean, I was still learning along the way, even with an independent publisher. I had to go through an editing process and find an editor. And you find an editor, and then, well, they want to know what kind of editing. Are you talking about content editing? And I'm like, yeah, content editing. So you start with that. We got through the content editing part, and then it's, now you need proofreading. Because apparently they're not looking at the commas and whatever else. But in addition to all of that, then you have to learn how to do all the marketing on your own. And the publisher was able to guide me through it. You're still responsible for your own marketing, but they helped me set up the website that I have, which I'm pretty happy with. They had told me go to LinkedIn. That's your best source right now, because I'm not a Facebook person. Mm-hmm. And then they suggested I get on Instagram, and I've been accumulating followers over the last several months. And I've got I've got my granddaughters are the brain trust here, coming up with material for me to help sell the book. So if you've seen some of the posts on Instagram, they're the ones doing the back and forth. They've done a couple of commercials for me, and they're helping out promote the book, and they do a really good job. But so to be self-publishing, I think it would be very daunting. You find that when you write a book, the easiest part of writing the book is writing the book. The toughest part is getting it published, getting it printed, particularly in a COVID deal where everything was delayed again. None of the traditional marketing approaches like launch parties were available to me, because none of the stores could host one.
Right.
And then you find out by trial and error, how is it going to work at an author signing? And I had varying degrees of success for the most part, not so successful, but I'm still open to the idea of doing those in the future. But you have to then learn the marketing part is the toughest part of the whole thing.
So how long did it take you to actually write the book?
Again,
You said you did
yeah.
it and then had to redo it? Or
Well,
change
12 months plus 3 months. And then I got back, after I went back and re-edited it on my own, when I actually sat down with an editor, that was another 3 to 4 to 5 months. And I thought, boy, I'm pretty much done. I'm sending it off to proofreading. And I thought, well, you know, I'll go through the proofread in about an hour. And I got 2,500 comments back. Which I was shocked. Now, and what was amazing is the editor of the proofreader still found mistakes in the book, and grammar mistakes. Even though a dozen people had been through it and fly-specced it, she was still able to come up with errors, which thank God we were able to fix before we went to print. A lot of it, I kind of joked with her that we were trading commas, but that part actually did finally go fairly quickly, but again, it adds to the time, and then you get in line to print, and that's a several months process right now.
Yeah, that really sounds, and you're the one who had to find the editor and the proofreader, you said, not the publisher.
Actually, the publisher kind of supplied those to me, gave me a couple of options.
Gave you some names and things. Yeah. So what would you recommend? I mean, you learned a lot on this first experience, I'm sure, and you know exactly what to do next time. What would you recommend for new writers? Do you know that this is National Novel Writing Month?
I did. Yeah, I keep up with that kind of stuff now. Basically, I think you have to kind of learn your craft. Again, after spending 37 years in one field and you kind of drop in with both feet into another, you're starting from scratch, literally, on every aspect. So I think for the new writers, and me being a new writer at 62, you have to go out and really go to some of these conferences and learn the varying aspects of one, writing. And I had a pretty good handle on the writing part and grammar. Certainly, I found out I'm certainly not an expert by any means along the path here, but again, what are the unwritten rules? Like how many words supposedly in a book? You had to understand about story arc, about character development. You know, all the parts that kind of go into the novel, any novel or any book. And then they talk as much about the marketing of stuff, options for publishing, but you have to kind of learn that all to get a feel as to where you want to be. And I've heard some people say they're happy self-publishing. Some people say they don't want to publish unless they have a traditional publisher, which again is kind of a long road. But yeah, you just have to kind of go in and figure the whole thing out.
So your publisher is sort of an independent publisher. Is that how you would term it? Yeah. Exactly.
And in fact, it's strangely enough, for people that have read the book, you know, we're talking about a serial killer after clergy. Orange Hat's primary target is kids' books. And when I sat down with the Shannon, who owns the publishing company originally, she said, well, you know, we have two different paths. One, if it's my passion, and that's about self-development and or kids' books, we put it in one path where we don't charge you anything, but otherwise you go through a path and you know, you pay for your own editing and that type of thing, which I was prepared to do anyway. But I said, you know, this is so close to what you do, Shannon, in terms of kids' books. Trying to push her a little bit, but so they've created a whole second publishing company called 1016 Press, and so they've kind of divided. They don't have kids' books mixed with serial killer books and mysteries and that type of thing. And I think it's probably going to help their brand. Having multiple brands over time will be good for them.
So they're trying as hard as you are to get known in the business, in a sense, right?
Yeah, and And you find you're like one person in a life raft on the ocean, bobbing and trying to get attention, along with all the other writers and people out there trying to sell a book.
Yeah, and I have a different perspective as a librarian. I'm trying to purchase the books and discover
Exactly.
what's really well done. And I know a lot of people do publish books that are very badly edited. And, that's a shame because they get lost in the crowd that way, I think, more than ever. But
Yeah, and I think that was the one thing that the Orange Hat folks is we want to help you publish the best book of that you have possible. And I think that happened here.
Well, that's really nice. It looks like you chose the right path. And do you consider it an expensive project to write a book, to get started? I suppose once you make it, are successful, you'll make money off of it, but it sounds like it's not easy to get to that point.
I think I've told my wife this would probably be the most expensive hobby I've ever taken on, short of unless I want to go start taking flying lessons.
Yeah. Have you considered writing magazine articles?
I've done that in the past, but no, I guess I'm kind of more dialed into the whole novel thing at this point, kind of committed. In fact, I've got 2 follow-up novels that have been completed, one of which the publisher is now looking at. And I'm starting a 4th one.
Wow, you're really moving along there.
Trying to stay ahead.
Yeah. What would you ever like to see a movie made based on your books?
Absolutely. And I've kind of joked with how slow everything works in the publishing world. My impression is that it works even slower in the movie industry, that my kids or my grandkids will be the ones that be the beneficiary of any kind of movie rights out of this deal. So.
Well, I read some of the comments on your book on Amazon or somewhere, and somebody said it read like a movie.
Yeah, I've had that comment come back to me a couple of different times. So I don't know how hard it would be to make a movie. I guess you have to find the absolute right person
to do this
and have and ring a bell with that person that actually knows how to make and is interested in making movies.
Yeah, I think a screenplay has a little different approach, doesn't it, from writing a novel?
I would think so. Yeah, that'd be the next piece I'd have to tackle if we ever got that far.
And in your, so you have written 3 more books, you said, or working on 3?
I've got 2, a first edition or a first draft of the second book, which takes off from the initial detective that was in the first scene of Men of God, Chuck Nowitzki, and he and his partner in this become the focal people in book 2 and book 3 and in the planned book for 4. So, and Chuck is an easy person to write about because he's such a train wreck.
Those are the most sympathetic characters, right?
Exactly.
So you are continuing the characters in the books. So it'll be a series.
And there's a thought of bringing back Nick in book 4, who was the primary character, protagonist in book 1.
Mm-hmm. And do you find the rural or the smaller Wisconsin towns a good setting for this kind of book? Did you know there's a lot of mystery writers over in Minnesota? It's really nice to see more here in Wisconsin.
Yeah, actually finding mystery writers in Wisconsin's been pretty hard. I've been looking actively to find them, just to collaborate if nothing else. And they're kind of few and far between in Wisconsin. But it would be nice to have a little bit. There's enough creative energy up in Door County that you would think that it would exist, and maybe it's just a matter of time before more of them surface, and there's more collaboration that could take place.
I think if you have you talked to Right on Door County at all? I don't know if they have anything to do with specifically mystery writers, but I'm sure they do. I know Pat Skolka is one that's well known here.
And I've sat down with Pat, and she's very encouraging along the way. I caught her just as she was going through final edits of one of her books, and I got 45 minutes to have coffee with her, but it was, just interesting to connect with some of these people. I did some stuff with Right On for a while, and that's where I found out really I'm a bit of a unicorn up here in terms of a mystery writer in Door County, that there aren't really all that many others. And so, yeah, like I said, I have hopes over time that there will be more of us up here that will come together.
We did have Brian Freeman come over, but he is from Minnesota, and he said one of his books here in Door County. Have you encountered him at all?
I have not.
But they have quite a big organization over there of mystery writers, as I understand it. We also did William Kent Kruger for one of our Door County reads a couple years ago. He writes a lot of mystery, but again, Minnesota. So I'm really glad to see you here in Wisconsin.
No, good to be here, and yeah, I'll have to look into the Minnesota thing.
Yeah. Well, does anyone in the audience have questions to ask? Yes.
Jim, it's Bob, and you touched on it briefly, but I know one of the marketing aspects of getting the news out on a book is the signings. And I know you've had one or two of them, but with the pandemic, obviously that has created more issues than you might have expected. Any plans on doing more of those? And then what is the process of the book signing as to getting the word out, showing up, going through that entire situation?
Book signings, Bob, have been, as I said, kind of a little bit of hit and miss. I think the biggest deal is finding a willing partner at a bookstore that's fairly established. And that partner then, I think what I've come to discover is that you really need to have some sort of connection to that bookseller, and or that seller's really got to be committed to pushing it pretty hard to get people in. And again, you're fighting with everything else in the world for time. People that will come, but sometimes it just doesn't always work out. With the pandemic, that's just made it harder because nobody really wants to do a book signing in a store and getting a crowd of people all wearing masks together in a socially distant world. So we did one in the fall that was an outside signing, and that was fine. And actually at Lion's Mouth down in Green Bay, and they did everything they needed to do. And it was pretty early in the process for me, and I don't really know all that many folks in Green Bay. So even though the bookstore did everything that they could, it really wasn't all that successful for me. So I think it's a process right now. I have no plans to do it. I think we're going to be all forced back indoors, but I'm willing to do anything, particularly with the Door County Library or any of the booksellers that really want to do something. In fact, I was contacted the other day by a yardstick down in Algoma, and they said they'd be willing to do something when the world calms down.
Yeah.
Joanne, did you have a question?
I have a couple of questions, actually. I'd like to know who some of your favorite authors are, and did they influence you? And I'd also like to know, were any of the characters in the book based on people you actually know?
Okay. First question, I like Brad Thor, who writes, there's a character called Scott Horvath. It's a recurring character, former Navy SEAL that seems to get himself into a lot of international issues, particularly like David Baldacci as well. And kind of reconnected with John Grisham. I'd read some of his early stuff when he was doing things about the law. And then for me, he kind of went in a totally different direction. He lost me. And then there was a book that I got for Christmas one year. And I can't, to be honest with you, I can't remember the title of it, but it kind of got me back. And now I'm reading, the current book I'm reading is a book called The Guardians, which is a Grisham novel. And it's about a lawyer that's trying to get people off of death row that have been wrongly convicted. In terms of the characters in the book, yeah, there's people that I was kind of careful that there's no one person that I specifically targeted, but like an amalgam of people. And so I took little bits of this person I know and little bits of that person and kind of pushed them all together. I think it probably more than a little bit of me in some of the characters, good and bad. Like I said, after you've been working for 37 years, you meet a lot of people, and you have some people that stand out and just kind of, you think back to them and they kind of inspire you, or there's parts that you absolutely want to include because they're just fun. That the one scene, I remember, if you remember the scene where Frank walks in and opens the door to Nick's conference room and basically gives him the finger. That actually happened to me. And it was just it was just a fun thing. It wasn't, there was nothing strange, weird about it. It just made me laugh. And then I did return the favor to the person about a month later, and it made him laugh too. But just like I said, and that's the only part of that particular person that's actually in this book. So.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions from the audience?
Yeah, I've got one. Jim?
Yes. How you doing, Jim?
I'm doing good. A couple of questions. Do you use an outline when you begin your plot process?
For this book, I didn't, because it had been kind of just marinating in me for so long. The book kind of started for me about 3 or 4 years before I retired. And basically, with a glass or two of wine after dinner with my wife, just kind of talking about this whole thing. And she said, you should be getting a whiteboard and writing this stuff down. But it was so ingrained in my brain that I really didn't. So I would get to certain scenes and then kind of scratch them out beforehand and how they would connect. And of course, whenever you're writing, you're never really done until you're done, until it's been printed. But I did subsequently go out and buy a whiteboard so that the follow-up books really did have more of a, who is this person? Who is that person? How are they going to connect? Which scene? And the other thing is, as part of the process with each major character, I went back and kind of did a backstory on them. And I've kept that because you need continuity when you have a recurring character. It's a blessing and a curse. The blessing is people know who the person is, but the curse is the author has to remember exactly what did I say about him in the first book or two.
Yeah. The second question I had is, how large was your first run of printing?
I think I did a couple of hundred for me. And like, you don't know what to expect. The publisher said, for the most part, she recommended we do 25 hard copies and 75 soft copies. I ordered another bunch because I actually went through a bunch of hard copies quicker. So I think it was 30 and then 20, or 30 and 70. I've still got some sitting around here. And I'm not sure exactly what. I haven't checked lately. I have to check with the publisher about anything that I'm doing online. But I had sold, I think there was 14 books in a week or so, the first week after it launched. And I keep going into Amazon, and I'm curious because I don't know the answer to this question. It says 7 are available and more to come, which I assume more to come means someone's buying the thing. So,
Will there be an audiobook?
no, I have no plans for an audiobook. It's something I probably should look into.
Okay, Sarah, did you have a question?
Did. I'm a huge fan.
Hey, Sarah, good to see you, by the way.
Good to see you too. Jim was a former mentor of mine in one of his previous lives. And the conversations I only remember were the ones of us talking about what we were reading. So I'm so proud of Jim. He's a clever guy, and this is a clever book, and it grabbed me right from the beginning. And if a book doesn't grab me from the beginning, I usually lose somewhat of an interest. So this was an excellent book. The questions I have are, first, do you use an advanced reading team?
Okay, so my team is probably my wife to start with. When I actually sat down to write the first time, I wrote the prologue, which was the first draft where the priest gets killed. So I gave that to her, and she said, "Oh my gosh, I didn't know you could write." She was shocked after 30 some years that she knew I had any talent at all. So I sent it out. My daughter Jamie read in advance, and then Kathy Volkel, who's part of this, got it. I think about 8 or 10 folks read it. The initial draft, and the initial draft was a totally different ending than what you read with the printed copy, and so it really had good support. It was more interested in, does the story hold together? Tell me about the characters. Do you like the characters? Joanne's husband went through it and fly-specced it, found errors. So it's almost like, what do they always say? It takes a village to raise a child. I think it takes a bigger village to write a book. So there is an advanced team, and that all, for me, that was who I kind of used. I guess it was a team before I got it to the editor.
Great. The second question is, do you have a timeline for your second novel release?
I do. Right now, they have the second novel. In theory, the editor is going through it, and I need to contact her. We've talked about a release of June of next year. And when we get to the end today, Sarah, I've got a couple of pages that I'll read to give you a little bit of advance as to where this is going.
Wonderful. I look forward to it. Jim, I have to say I am so impressed. It was so good, and these are also on my Christmas list. So I'm sending a lot of people your book this year.
That's good. Hey, that's love to hear that.
Are there any characters you especially like, and why?
Me?
Oh,
Jim?
I didn't know who you were directed it to, Laura.
Or anyone, really, anyone.
Well, I know Jim Blair had commented he wants to see more of Philemon, who just kind of the, screwball people, a guy that just kind of living on the edge. Like I said, Chuck is going to be the primary guy. He's easy to write because he's just a mess. Drinks too much. He's been married a couple of times. As he says, he's broke because he split up his stuff a bunch of different times. But he's pretty good at his job. And he's got kind of a strange relationship. He doesn't dress well, and he's partnered with a young lady who dresses to the nines. And they're kind of figuring each other out as much as trying to figure out how to work together. And so that will be pretty much the primary guy. But again, I think it's kind of fun to pepper in some people, even if they're like in bit scenes. There's an interesting dialogue between Anissa and a really off the wall guy in book 2. So I think those are the fun parts to kind of just makes my day. Boy, talk about writing 1,000 words. It takes about makes it they go really fast when you get to one of those kind of scenes where you can add somebody like that.
Does anyone else in the audience have any comments or questions?
I have
Well, I have a question and a comment.
Okay.
The first, I'll make the comment first. My wife and I are one of the few that get to read the drafts because we're related. And I will go on record saying that book 1 is excellent, book 2 is better, and book 3 is better yet. So just wait. Because he's taking these great characters in this first book, which I really like, and has developed some of them even more into the second book and into the third book. And now you're just waiting for that fourth book to see what they do next. So my question to you, Jim, is you got a lot of people in this first book, a lot of well-developed characters. Did you have most of them or all of them already in your mind before you started writing it on paper, or did some of them come to you as you were going along?
That's kind of the interesting question, because you've got this idea for a story in your head, and I had it there for a long, long time, and I thought about doing this, and you sit down and you go, okay, what's the name of this character? What's this character? And I had none of that. And so I literally kind of was one of those kind of setbacks in terms of, and you find that it's kind of like ebbs and flows, where I've got the story, but no, I really don't know who's going to do what. And it takes a bit of research. The Nick character took a couple of months of research because I was looking to find a para-rescue man, a former one, and it took several months to get through the security process, and before the para-rescue folks would talk with me. And so I got some background from him, but literally you got to dream these people up. And then, like I said, you got to write the stuff down so you remember exactly what this character is. One of the things editors go through and look at is, well, gee, you said this young lady had blue eyes early in the movie, and all of a sudden she's got green eyes later in the book. Well, so it's kind of like you've got to keep notes, and you really got to know your own characters if you're going to keep using them over and over again. The throwaway characters, the fun ones, are the ones that are the easiest because you can make them as good or bad as you want. And if you never have to refer to them again, those are easy. But I guess that's the long answer to, yeah, it takes, it's a whole different part of the writing process that you really got to know and develop your characters. And then where are they going? Sometimes characters, strange as it sounds, do things that you don't expect. Even though I'm punching the keys here into the keyboard, the character does something that I really had not expected, which sounds strange.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Thanks.
I've heard that from other writers, that the characters write themselves. So that's an interesting idea. Joanne, did you have something to say?
Yes, I do. The one part where your character hands out the military badges, is that a true thing that happens, or is that just something you made up?
Those patches actually exist because I went online to find them. And my daughter, I have a daughter that was in the military. In fact, I've got a board here of all the patches, the mission patches that she had when she flew helicopters. And some of them are a little bit more, I guess, a little more racy than some of the others, but those patches actually exist.
Well, I wondered about that when I read it. I thought, now, is this just a figure of his imagination, or is this something that really exists? So that was good to put that in there. Maybe
Yeah, and
think about something different.
The part where he used them to pick up women, that was from me, though. So
Well, that was a good one.
Anyone else? Okay.
You mentioned that in the first read that the ending was different. So how did that differ from what I read?
Frankly, it's one of the things I struggled with in the first book was, how do you end the book? And I knew who I wanted the killer to be. The killer is still the same. But it was like, how did Nick discover the killer? And so there was a long extended trip, in the end, and it kind of, I think it just kind of got away from me. There was a flashback scene, and he ends up reading the journals, and he comes to the right conclusion. But that was the twist, and it's kind of like in the epilogue, you're kind of going, well, why am I still reading? If everything's been figured out, why am I still reading? There's got to be more, and there's only 2 characters left, so it didn't end in the right spot for me. And so that was something that the editor came up with, not that, just that it needed to change. She said, I hate your ending. I love the book, but I hate the ending. So that was one of the things she challenged me on. The other thing was Nick in the original book was too perfect. There was nothing he had that he was just too good to be true. So it was like, you've got to come up with some flaws, and the more interesting the character is because they had the character flaws, and he had none. So we had talked about a couple of different options, and the PTSD thing was one. Obviously, that's not far off the trail for some of the veterans that return home. and some of the symptoms that they had. So that was another layer of research I had to get back into as part of that 3 or 4 months of re-editing the book.
Any more comments?
Hey, Jimmer.
Are you going to do any based on the jewelry business?
That is the second book.
Oh, good.
And there's a series of jewelry thefts that take place. Good morning, Wally.
You're not supposed to see me walking through there.
That's okay. The droids don't know you're here. So, but yeah.
So are you selling a lot of books?
I'm doing okay.
Good.
I have still not moved to Cottage Row, but still have great hopes.
Okay.
Yeah, no, the second book is Chuck Nowitzki gets involved. There's a series of jewelry thefts, and it extends from the valley, Fox Valley, up to Door County, and back into Chicago.
Oh.
And so it'll be, I think it makes for an interesting read. And like I said, when I got done with it, I thought it was a much better book than the first one.
Wow.
You were going to send me a copy of it to review.
I haven't.
You haven't? No.
Well, I will rectify that, Wally.
Okay.
Well, I'll also say jewelry is a little more glamorous than insurance. So I look forward to that one.
Exactly. But there is an insurance element to the second book. And it's kind of intriguing because and I sat down with the person at an old contact at Jewelers Mutual, who's a security expert, and we went back through stuff. I hadn't seen him in years, which was kind of like one of those added benefits of going through this process. There's people that I've reconnected with in writing the first book, but also in researching the other ones. But he hooked me up with the people at the FBI and some real heavy-duty security experts in New York City. And I was able to get into some nuts and bolts there that kind of add some real detail to it. And there's an insurance element that is totally different from any other kind in that part that, again, I'm certainly not trying to make anyone an insurance expert, but there is a wrinkle there. Third book departs from insurance altogether.
Well, that all gives it a sort of realistic twist, doesn't it? When you
it does, and again, write what you know. So
yeah. Any other questions or
Hey,
comments?
Jimmer. Hey, Jimmer. I was just
hey, how you doing?
good. I'm incredibly proud of you. I'm a little sad my mom can't read the book because as a treasured reader, I know she would love it too. I'm still in the middle of reading it, so I do love that we haven't given away the specifics on the ending because I'm not yet done with it. But what was, as you're writing the book, what was one of the interesting, I guess, twists or change plots that may have happened from what you envisioned and what happened as you got into the writing?
I think and again, not to give away the ending, Sheila, let's put it this way, there's all the characters are in the book that you know, but things develop in the last couple of scenes that are just twists that you really weren't anticipating. And when it's kind of interesting, because then when you go back and look at it, you're going, boy, I could have seen this coming, or I should have seen this coming, or why didn't I see this coming? And again, I thought it made for an interesting twist at the end. So you've got everything I think that you need. So just kind of, I'll be curious to get your reaction when you get done with the book and tell me what you think then.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I guess the twist or change, was that a surprise to you as the author? I mean, or was there anything that as you were writing it twisted for you as the author?
Well, it was one of those things in the editing process. And again, I had that kind of eureka moment and going, well, what if I did this? And again, because it's strange because the books aren't done until they're printed. So you're kind of going back and tinkering with stuff all along. And you get this idea and say, well, wait a second, I had never contemplated that before. So I had to go back and rewrite early portions of the book to make it kind of seem more logical, so that by the time you got to the end, you say, oh, okay, I I understand how there's a relationship here that I hadn't anticipated before.
How do you write women characters? How do you approach that? I did see one comment online, Amazon or somewhere, about women characters in your book.
Yeah, and that's I think that's one of the challenges for me. It's just hard to write. I had my brother-in-law ask me the other day. He said, "Well, how do you know so much about women's fashion?" And I said, "I know as much about women's fashion as I find on Google." And I said, "I know as much about women's fashion as I do about high-tech sniper rifles, because I'm not a hunter. So some of that stuff exists out there. So I guess a lot of that goes back to people that you know, people that you've liked, people that you've disliked, and try to take elements of those characters, whether they're male or female, and try to pull it together. But it is kind of difficult to put that perspective on in terms of what is woman thinking. And again, for like the Anissa character, she's really doing her best just to do her job. And you get more of that in book 2 when that character starts to develop a little bit more. Yeah, I think the woman that you're referring to that had reviewed that part said that I think the Mallory, the assistant, was a sexy assistant. And I don't, it's interesting because there was no relationship. There was always a tension between Nick and Mallory, but it was not a sexual tension.
Mm-hmm. Well, anyone else have comments or questions? Otherwise than that, we are coming up on an hour. Would you like to read from your next book?
Yeah, I'll give you kind of a snapshot. It takes about 3 minutes. And basically, as I said, it's a book about jewelry theft. This is from the opening. It's edited down a little bit. And it takes place outside of a sandwich shop, and it sets up a burglary. So with the all clear sign, the second white panel truck passed the first sitting on the street and pulled down the alley immediately adjacent to Bob's sandwich shop. Moose had already picked the back door lock of the shop just like he had for the previous 9 evenings before triggering the jewelry store's alarm. On the first evening, he had been particularly cautious, stopping at the entrance door waiting for something unexpected. The sound of a newly installed local alarm bell, the snarling of a dog, or the cocking of a handgun. On this evening, he heard only crickets chirping in the grass. Once in the store, he signaled his partners, and the 4 professionals wore jumpsuits, ski masks, and headlamps to light their way. In short order, they emptied their vehicle, quietly carrying several heavy bags containing their equipment into the kitchen. It was time to go to work. Using a reciprocating saw purchased from Home Depot, one member of the crew created a new doorway from Bob's into Bateman's. Once through, the others quickly located the imposing safes and began their assault on the heavy boxes. Moose made a final call to the driver. "Can you hear us out on the street?" "Negative," came the reply. With no time pressure from the police or the alarm service and having ears on the street, the team meticulously went about their work. At precisely 5 a.m., their shift was over. Although it would not be light for another 45 minutes, the crew had a timetable to keep. 3 of the men repacked the van with the tools and equipment. They also carefully stowed 5 fully packed military-style duffels into the van. Adrenaline coursed through their systems, giving them each a high. As their excitement peaked, Moose contacted the driver. "Okay, boys, the boys have a load, and they're heading out to the truck. Pull up to the front door." Moments later, the truck rolled up the street before parking across from the sandwich shop. The driver quickly hopped out, opening both side doors of the van as Moose stepped out of the Bateman's Jewelers. "How did it go?" asked the driver. "Like clockwork. We thought we could get into 3 safes, but we were able to hit number 4 with our plan." Moose coughed as he hoisted 2 heavy duffel bags into the vehicle one by one. Sitting on the floor of the van with his legs dangling, he caught his breath. "Are you all right, Moose?" said the driver. "I think I'm catching a cold," he shot back. "It must be lack of sleep." He pulled off his balaclava, tossing it into the back of the truck before taking yet another deep breath. "What was the take, Moose?" "All the high-end stuff, diamonds and gold, exactly what, and everything was exactly where we were told it would be." "Any guess on the total?" "Probably $1 million plus for each bag. Seriously, said the driver. In the twilight, he noticed one of Moose's arms glistening with blood. Are you hurt? Your arm. No, replied Moose reflexively as he began to check himself, eventually finding the rips in the left arm of his jumpsuit. Feeling his body, Moose fingered a couple of deep scratches near his shoulder where the blood had seeped through. I must have caught myself on something sharp when we entered the store. I didn't even feel it. It doesn't look like a big deal, though. Maybe a couple of stitches at worst. Let's get the merchandise to the airport, ditch the vehicles, and get some breakfast. I'm starving. As the driver began doing the math on the evening's take, calculating his share, he hit the gas harder than he intended, squealing the tires briefly before moving down the street into the quiet of the still quiet neighborhood. So that sets up where we're going for book 2.
Good.
If there's blood left behind, that opens the door to DNA, doesn't it?
Exactly. You're ahead of me.
Well, we do have an author talk coming up in December with another local author, Dan Powers, and his book is based on his genealogy research. So
Okay.
that should be an interesting one too, if anyone wants to join us. But thank you very much, Jim. Did anyone want to comment on that, the next book, or have any questions about that? Are you writing it more from the perspective of the criminals this time?
Nope. No, like I said, Chuck will be, he's up to his eyeballs in this thing. So he's the primary lens, I guess, for the character.
Okay, well, thank you very much, everyone, for joining us.
Thank you.
We will all look forward to the next book. And you said it probably around June?
I'm hoping so. But again, everything moves slow in the publishing world. So,
Yeah.
But Laura, this is going to be posted on YouTube, you said?
Yes, in a few days.
Marvelous.
And it should be on Facebook also,
Excellent.
on the library's Facebook page. Thank you again.
Well, thank you for everyone making time today. Appreciate it.
Nice job, Jim.
Yeah,
right.
very nice.
Thank you
Thanks.
very
Good job, Jim.